Okay, good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're dialing in from. My name is Gaurav Manchanda with Math Challenge. I'm just looking to say a few words here as a partner and sponsor of Sustainability Week across the globe. And forgive me for the background, I'm dialing in from another sustainability conference in real life elsewhere in the country at the moment. But I am the Chief Program Officer at Math Challenge. And again, thank you again for joining us today as we hear from our panel about how we can all contribute to sustainability. Math Challenge is proud to partner with the Boston Globe for this year's Sustainability Week. And I want to take a few moments just to introduce Math Challenge for those who haven't heard or are not aware of us previously. So we are a Massachusetts-based organization, and our mission is to equip bold entrepreneurs to disrupt the status quo and create meaningful change. Since 2009, Math Challenge has supported more than 4,000 startups through our accelerator programs that provide resources like non-dilutive capital, access to corporate and government clients, free office space, and connections to our global ecosystem of partners, mentors, and investors. Our programs usually support founders anywhere from the pre-revenue or pre-seed stage all the way up to Series B. And at our core, I'll say we believe in collectively building a stronger, more sustainable future through collaboration. We are a documenter. And I'm thrilled to say that Math Challenge is connecting with the Boston Globe in this forum to explore sustainability and how we can all contribute to making small changes that lead to global impact. So with that said, I'm excited to introduce today's moderator, Erin Douglas, climate reporter at the Boston Globe, who will lead the conversation and the critical discussion along with sustainability leaders on practical tips that we can all take to fight climate change in our own ways and work towards a more sustainable future. So thanks for having me, and I'll pass off to Erin.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Welcome everyone to our Boston Globe Sustainability Week. On behalf of myself and all my colleagues, we thank you for your interest, for tuning in to this panel discussion about how we can all live more sustainably. My name is Erin Douglas. I'm the climate reporter at the Boston Globe, and I primarily cover the impacts of climate change and how we can adapt human society to a changing climate. So our panelists today are really exciting. First, we have Julie Newman. I want to welcome her. Julie is the Director of Sustainability at MIT. She has worked in the field of sustainable development and campus sustainability for more than 2 decades. Her research has focused on the intersection between decision-making processes and organizational behavior in institutionalizing sustainability into higher education. So welcome, Julie. Next, we have Maria Vasco. Maria is the owner of Uvita, Boston's first zero waste store, which she opened in December 2020. She began her career as an entrepreneur at UMass Boston, where she majored in environmental studies. During her senior year, she was awarded an entrepreneurship scholarship, which ultimately motivated and inspired her to create Uvita. So welcome to Maria. And then lastly, we have Greg Maslow. Greg is the farm manager at Newton Community Farm, which provides locally grown produce and educates the public about sustainable practices for agriculture. Greg has been the farm manager at Newton Community Farm since 2006, and he came to farming through his graduate work in environmental and agricultural ethics. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to get started, but I did want to let the audience know that if you have questions during the panel, you can use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to some of those questions that you submit towards the end of the discussion. So I just wanted to start off, maybe briefly have each of you talk just really briefly, what drew you to sustainability work? And can you give us a specific example of a personal sustainable action or change that you've made in your life that has also influenced your family and friends? And, maybe we can start with Maria.
So originally what got me into sustainability was my major in college. I was learning about climate change, plastic pollution, CO2 emissions for 4 years. And I just really felt like I wanted to do something more about it and outside of class. So that is how I discovered the zero waste movement, which is all about reducing the amount of plastic waste that we produce. And I completely just dove in head first. And I truly believe that through my actions and through being zero waste at home, my friends, when they come over, or family members, when they come over, they see that some of the things that I do are different than the average person. So they ask questions, and then sometimes they think it's really cool. Sometimes they're intrigued, and then eventually they are more interested in trying it themselves. So that's how I've seen my zero waste habits be spread to my community.
Awesome. Julie, do you want to chime in next?
Sure. And just thank you again, Erin, and to the Boston Globe for hosting this important discussion. Hopefully this is just the beginning. Boy, there were so many stories I thought of, and I was thinking about this panel, but I guess I've two specifics that really led me to this field. I mean, I've been committed. I haven't veered. I've been committed to this field since before college and through college. And there was a period of time throughout college where I actually thought I was going to be that marine biologist. Right, I was coming out of kind of the Jacques Cousteau era, and I actually had the fortune of working for a turtle researcher in Australia for about a month and for over one summer. And he was tagging sea turtles because this was in 1990, and he was already starting to study the impacts of climate change on the feeding grounds of migrating turtles. And that was the first I'd really been exposed to thinking about the implications of climate change on our oceans. But what I found was, how was he, and why I became curious too, is how do you translate science to policy? So that's really become my drive for my whole career. And then my next pivot was as a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala, and working on as an environmental volunteer on actually issues of erosion and reforestation, and really looking at the intersection of poverty, climate equity, gender equity, and sustainable development at large. So that was like the next evolution of that. And then ended up committing my career to thinking about my burning question, which continues, is, what are the organizational structures and behaviors that are responsive to, inform, and, influence this climate trajectory that we are on? So that really is relevant to today, from the systemic change to individual behavior. On a personal note, I say for the relevancy of today, I used we have so many amazing tax incentives through Massachusetts, and I had the fortune of, as a homeowner, of putting solar on my my house, and I'd say 10 months out of the year we have a zero electric bill. So really, I'm that annoying parent who turns everything off at all times, but really just the evolution at the individual level. So lots of good examples there, but a recognition of how to, both as a citizen, a colleague, and a parent, on how to make those challenging choices.
Sure. And then lastly, Greg.
Thank you, Erin. Well, I guess I owe a lot of gratitude to my mom for my interest in sustainability. I grew up in the 70s in Colorado, and my mom was a master gardener. We had most of our backyard was a garden. We composted. We didn't have, I don't even know if there were PV panels back then. We had solar hot water on our roof. So it strikes me, it didn't strike me at the time, but it strikes me now as actually very progressive. She was into xeriscaping because Colorado is a semi-arid desert and lawns are not great. So I grew up as working as a gardener, putting myself through college and grad school that way, but not really being concerned with organics. I just liked growing things, and I got into organics when I was in Berkeley as a master's student. Berkeley being the center of the organic universe, it seems. When I was in Boston later doing my PhD in science, philosophy, and religion at BU, I had to pick a topic, and I was interested in environmental ethics, but I didn't want students to be, I didn't want them just to be engaged with sort of abstract, faraway things that were going on in other parts of the world. And so my interest in agriculture was spurred sort of by pedagogy. I wanted to engage students with everyday actions that they were taking, that they could maybe choose to do something different. And I really like working with high school and college age students because they are becoming adults, they're becoming independent, and a lot of their actions and their ways of living in the world are just sort of what they do because that's how they're raised by their parents, and they haven't necessarily thought about the fact that they are going into the world and they can choose to live differently. They can choose to eat a different diet or to live in a different way. Um, so that really is that a lot of the inspiration for me is trying to use the idea of choice to encourage young people to think about sustainability. Um, personal, I guess the personal side of this is I chose to leave academia. I decided I didn't want to teach in university, and I moved to a farm, albeit a farm in a very odd location, being Newton. But I raised my kids on a farm, and I think that has had a pretty profound effect on them. They, um, I think, appreciate it more now that they're in college and they come home and they are like, wow, the food here is so good and so fresh and so different from what we get when we're other places in the world. So.
Awesome. Maria, I know that you told me in one of our conversations that you opened Boston's first refill and zero waste store after being inspired by some of those stores that you saw during your travels abroad. And I was curious, why do you think it feels so difficult for, people living here in Boston to live sustainably?
Yeah, so during my summer between my junior and senior year of college, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Madrid, Spain, and I got assigned to live in a specific apartment under the study abroad program. And this apartment had a zero waste store on the first floor, and I absolutely ended up loving it, and I became dependent on that store for 3 months as I refilled my dish soap, my shampoo, my body wash, all the liquids that we have in our apartment for cleaning. And once I got back to Boston, I was really bummed out to realize that I was not going to be able to refill again because that is not the norm here. And what I also discovered is that in Europe, there are a lot of zero waste stores. It's more part of the culture for these stores to be available and accessible and an option for people. So I truly believe that's a reason why it's harder to be sustainable here in the US and here in Boston because we don't have access to these kind of stores. We don't have a plastic-free 100% bulk grocery store. We have our zero waste store and we focus specifically on products, things that are not edible. So through creating these stores, we are giving options to our the people that live in the city of Boston, but we really need more of these options in order for people to be able to even practice and consider ways to be more sustainable. And that also reflects in other areas such as composting in the city and collecting rainwater. We are in a concrete jungle if you live in the city. And so a lot of these times, these programs and cultures are not embedded in the life of living in a city. So if I feel like if we can incorporate that more into city living, it will help us all catch on to habits that are more aligned with sustainability.
Yeah, and just for the people who may not know what a refill store is, it's basically like I could, take a glass bottle and show up at your store and maybe refill it with lotion or with shampoo or whatever I might need.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of options and you choose if you want unscented dish soap or if you want scented dish soap, and we refill your bottle. You are able to bring in your own bottle, but we also have free bottles in the store and you only pay per ounce. So
Hmm.
it's about reducing the amount of plastic waste that you normally would produce. And also all of our products are vegan, non-toxic, made in the US, dye-free, sulfate, paraffin-free. So they're also non-toxic and safer for your families.
Gotcha. And then thinking a little bit more about consumer choices, Greg, I know you work a lot with food systems, and I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the barriers that you think consumers are facing when they're trying to shop for produce that is sustainable?
I think just the question of what sustainable
A
food
big question.
is a
Yeah.
is a challenge. It's a challenge to most people to even know what to choose. I've frequently been asked, I mean, organic food is expensive. Um, and I've often been asked by people, like, wow, it's really expensive. What should I choose to get if I can't do everything? And I often tell them, well, I mean, if you eat meat, you should choose organic meat. because that's the sort of highest bang for your buck in terms of reducing the effect on the planet, but also reducing the effect of pesticides in your body. I think, I really struggle. I don't struggle. I really don't want, we talk about this a lot about this with students in our high school intern program. I don't think there's a right diet. I don't think there's a right thing to eat or not eat. So I don't want to be seen as promoting vegetarianism or veganism or anything like that. But I do think that, I mean, we eat a lot of meat in this country and we eat big portions in this country. And both of those are detrimental to human health and both of those are detrimental to the environment. That said, I just finished reading an amazing book on no-till agriculture that demonstrates or argues for the importance of actually livestock in regenerating soils, which by regenerating soils, we're reducing the carbon in the atmosphere. So I really think that the biggest challenge most people have is just even understanding what the best choice is. And a great example is when you go to the grocery store, should you choose an organic apple or a local apple? If you live in New England,
Mm-hmm.
at this time, if you live in New England, you can go to a grocery store and you can buy an apple from Massachusetts or New York State that might not be organic. Or you can buy an apple that is organic that might be from Chile or New Zealand or Washington State. What's the best choice there for the planet? Is it the thing that's organic or the thing that's been transported thousands of miles?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to bring Julie in because, Greg brought up this idea that what even is sustainability, and being that, you have a lot of expertise in this area. If you were to boil it down for us, in a few words to maybe live by or to like direct your organization or, whatever, the attendees on this Zoom call are trying to do, like, how would you define sustainability?
Oh boy. Well, let me just start. Well, I just want to build on two things. I want to build on something
Yeah,
Greg said earlier.
sure.
Let me just say, when I got to MIT, there were 32 definitions of sustainability, and that's one organization in a city of, what do we have, 56 colleges and universities. And so I just want to be cautious of of a definition as much as a set of principles. The way we frame, what we did at MIT was take a stance of thinking about considering our impacts at the role of the individual, in our case, the campus, it might be in Greg's case, the farm, or Maria's case, the business, but putting that in the context or understanding our nested context of impact and influence that run from the individual through your organization into your municipality, your state, your nation, your globe, so that you're really considering from supply chain up and down to your individual impacts up and down through that system. So I'm cautious about on this panel of saying one definition. I will say the Brundtland Commission from 1987, if people want to look that up, still I think holds true as the underlying principles of considering the implication of resources for today and considering the available resources and implications for tomorrow. I think we're living in a time where this next generation is building up a lot of climate anxiety based on the condition of where we're at today. And I think that's going to feed into, be honest, my hunch is that we're going to have to revisit the definitions of sustainability and climate leadership given the state of the world today. It is very different than it was in 1987 when that definition was created, and our understanding of what we mean by sustainable development has, I think, evolved as well. So maybe this panel and this Earth Day is an opportunity to pause and rethink some of these pieces. So we're creating more of an intergenerational definition of sustainable development and climate and sustainability leadership. I think the piece I just want to comment on, also just related to your question, is I was really stuck on the notion of impossible. And I think we're so fortunate to be in this greater Boston area where our structures are trying to do all they can to enable more sustainable, choices, from tax incentives, just yesterday I heard Melissa Hoffer on the news from, I think it was through the NPR climate desk, saying that, all future affordable housing must be electrified, right? So I think we're moving in a direction that will better enable people to live sustainably across, across economic stratifications, if you will, based on these political dimensions in which we're embedded. I mean, there's a lot more to say. My one last piece is, preparing for this and thinking about this, I went back to some framings that looked at, and Greg, I was thinking of something you were commenting on around, a colleague of mine, Professor Julian Adjaman from Tufts, wrote this book number of years ago called Sharing Cities, A Case for Truly Smart and Sustainable Cities, that's looking at these shared economy and really new paradigms of sharing. And that's the piece I haven't heard mentioned quite as much. I don't mean today on the panel, but even in general, of thinking about, I live on a street, there must be 6 leaf blowers and 6 lawnmowers and, even car chargers. Like, we haven't gotten back to that framing of kind of community-based collaborative living, which I think would also enhance how we think about sustainable living.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned climate anxiety, and I think that there are a couple reasons why consumers don't always make sustainable choices. We've identified some of them. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's institutional barriers, maybe it's availability. But I think that one big one that I often hear from my family and friends is just it doesn't make a difference. Like, they do not believe it's going to make a difference. And there's this sense of doom that climate change is such a big problem. It's a global problem. I guess my question for you all would be, maybe we can ask, I'm going to pick Greg and put him on the spot. But, do individual choices even matter? And how do you respond to that when you hear that from your friends and family?
Well, I guess, I'm married to a kind of long-term feminist who would say that money is political, and you can change things with your purchasing power. I also, our economy is set up in such a way that there's a lot of money to be made on band-aids and not as much money to be made addressing systemic issues. And when I talk to young people, I really encourage them, go into research, go into science, but try and find a business that's going to allow you to really be tackling solutions to the actual problems, and not the sort of intermediate problems that we keep solving these little intermediate problems only to discover that they create new problems, or that they just are shifting the burden a little further down the road. And I've heard this from my own daughter, this sense of doom, and it's not worth it, and it's all, the corporations rule the world, and there's nothing that we can do to change things. And I think as soon as you accept that, pretty much everything is lost. Without hope, without belief that there can be a better future, it's hard to go on. It's hard to motivate yourself to do anything. So I have chosen a profession and a life that allows me to feel like my work is making a difference. And I get a lot of spiritual and emotional benefit from being engaged with something that I feel like does have meaning and it makes a difference in the world, at least because I'm doing less harm, as the doctors would say.
Yeah, and I often go back to the idea that if you were to account for every single carbon emission that you produce and try to like figure out your own personal carbon footprint or whatever it is, you pretty quickly realize like the most carbon effective thing would be for you to just simply not exist. And so I do wonder about what your all's thoughts are on that line of thinking of trying to account for your individual carbon footprint, because on one hand, individual people do need to make choices, right? But, Greg, what you're saying is we also need that, like, and what I've heard, the rest of you say is like, we need some collective action as well. And so how do you think about that tension? And, maybe I'm going to put it back to Julie.
You're at the tension between individual choices and systemic action is what you're asking?
Well, I think the tension between knowing that no matter how much I reduce my personal, impact on the environment, I'm always going to have some impact. versus like how do we move from individual to collective, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it has to be fluid. I was thinking of something, Greg, you said earlier around the trade-offs. I could see a future Boston Globe section where you work with universities or you know, and there's so many trade-offs people are asking for continuously that I think need to be better understood. First of all, I just want to say, you know, that I do think daily choices can lead to, I've even heard the term more recently around micro shifts and how they can lead to new habits, which can then lead to broad scale impact. So I think to what you're asking, Erin, it is making sure that, you know, that you then own those, you feel empowered to make those micro shifts. It might be going to Maria's store or going to Greg's farm, but that, you know, understanding what's around you, even if it's not 100% of your choices. I was listening to a podcast recently and I was taken by this this stuck with me, but that Gen Z bought 20% less milk than the national average, which shifted the mainstream of milks, right? We now go into a store. I mean, I didn't have that growing up. You couldn't go get oat milk or soy milk or almond milk, right? So, I mean, that's a generational, you know, shift that's been made by, you know, by individual choices. So the other reference maybe I think might be helpful for people, which I think was what you're asking to understand individual choices, is I went back to a group called there's a great analysis called Project Drawdown, and they've done a wonderful analysis of individual choices, actually based in, you know, grounded in data and carbon impact of those choices. I think there may be 25, and they range, you know, I mean, they're not going to be too surprising. And again, as you can hear from this panel, we're all very open-minded people trying to figure out the right path forward, but they range from the top five being plant-rich diets, you know, reducing food waste, to solar are which surprised me, were the three with the largest impact, solar, you know, carbon impact. And then it went to like insulation, LED lighting. And again, this isn't going to apply for everybody because some people are homeowners, other people, you know, are passing through or are not homeowners. And then public transit, recycling, carpooling. So it gives you this really nice range. And you know, I don't imagine every individual can do all 25, but as you're looking, so you're not feeling as disempowered, I think is what you're suggesting in this doom and gloom era. There's a really nice range of actions that I think are really nicely outlined as you seek to have some impact. And I think the key is that you're recognizing that you're part of a collective. Yes, you may only be one individual, but you're one individual amongst many, making many of these micro shifts. And I think in time that's the impact that we'll see. And you combine that with the systemic change that's taking place, and I think we then have the right equation moving forward.
Yeah, that example with the milk is so interesting. I want to bring Maria back into the conversation here. And one thing, you know, we've been talking about all these different choices and consumer choices that people can make. I think that one thing I hear a lot from folks is like, oh, these products are too expensive, or like buying organic produce is, you know, more expensive than buying not. And I'm sure you hear this a lot at your store. And so I would be curious about like how you think about the problem of making sure that these choices are equitable, accessible to folks of all income ranges, and how to make making the sustainable choice also the easy choice.
Yeah, totally. So we do get asked all the time, like, are all your products more expensive because they're organic or they're plastic free or they're made from a small business? And the reality is that some other products are a bit more expensive, but you're also paying for a higher quality product that is safer and better for your body. But on the other hand is sometimes the price up front is higher, but in the long term, it ends up saving you money. So a lot of our products are reusable. So they're intended for you to buy once and then you never buy it again. An example is our razors. You buy the razor once and then you only switch the blades for the rest of your life, and you keep that one razor because you're just switching the blades. So it's an upfront cost, and then you never have to buy a razor again. So a lot of our products really are about being reusable and buying them once and then not having to buy them again. Or also, for example, in our refill station specifically, a lot of our products are more economically affordable than competitors because we order it in bulk. So for our hand soap and dish soap and laundry, which is the refills that customers come in for the most to refill, because we all use those items in our home, we order them in bulk in 5 gallons, 10 gallons, and that helps us bring the price down. And even though the quality of the product is better because it's dye-free, paraben-free, and all these amazing has all these amazing characteristics, it's still more affordable than going to another store and paying for the packaging again. And as we mentioned before, for refill stations, you either bring in your own bottle or we have free bottles that are secondhand bottles. So you're also not paying for the packaging, you're not paying for the bottle, you're just paying for the product. So there are a lot of ways to go about it in order for it to be more affordable for the average consumer. But I also believe that everyone is able to make sustainable actions in their work, in their personal life. Everyone has a career that they're dedicating themselves to. So any career can truly be aligned more with sustainability. So whether you work in a hospital or whether you work at a nonprofit, if you are the person who brings up the conversation about how they're wasteful in their office or how they can refill the hand soap that they have in the office, or how they can really lower their emissions as a company as a whole, whether the company has anything to do with sustainability or not, is how we are all going to are able to make sustainable action within the systems that we are all currently in.
Well, Maria, you just anticipated my last question. So my last question is, what are some ways, or just maybe actually, since we're right at time, maybe one way that an individual can be part of sparking that collective and institutional action that is necessary to combat climate change on the global scale? And Maria, I'm gonna skip you because you just answered that exactly. It was perfect. And then I'm going to go to Julie briefly, and then Greg to close us out.
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, I'll
one
speak
thing, just one thing.
One thing. Oh boy. I have to think about that one. Greg,
Okay,
why don't you go first?
We'll go to
Let
Greg.
me think about my one thing, because you've just tied so many pieces together from the individual to the system. So go ahead, Greg.
I would say, from a agricultural perspective, from a food perspective, the one thing that you can do is to shop locally from farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs. There has been over the last 100 years a massive consolidation of farmland into corporate ownership. The number, farmers used to be the largest percentage of the entire US population in the census. And now when I fill out the census, it's not even a job option for me to fill out. So the farmland's being consolidated and the number of farmers is dwindling and the farmers are getting older. And that model, the model that we have is a very broken model, and it is doing a lot of harm to our world and a lot of harm to our personal health. So I really think that the thing that you can do is to support your local farmers so that farmland and farmers don't disappear.
Great.
That's
all
great.
Right, Julie.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, in terms of the audience, right, we've got consumer, we've got consumption, covered, ordering, and, managing our consumption less, being much more conscious of our food. I just want to concur with both of those. I mean, to be honest, what keeps coming to mind is my professional commitment right now is how to decarbonize our organizations in the context of our city. And I know that sounds complex, but it's really working with your thinking about what you as an individual can do on decarbonization, thinking about what's happening in your workplace, and educating yourself on what your city's doing as well, and really thinking about your role in decarbonizing society and educating yourself on that. There's a lot of different ways to participate in that as a consumer, as an employee, and as a voter today. And so we're in an election year, both at the municipal level, and the national level. And I think about figuring out how to take climate change back into our own hands to make sure that we're moving all of the pistons forward on that. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then Maria, did you want to add one thing if you wanted to?
I'll be really quick. And I definitely just believe that the best way to vote, aside from being in a poll, is through your money, because we are funding the large companies that are the main companies that are at fault for climate change. But while it might feel like it's out of our hands, when we make individual choices, we are deciding to fund those companies. And the moment that those companies are not receiving their funds and the investors that invest in those companies, they get worried. And that's when they're trying to figure out what is going on. Why are people not buying from us? Why are people not consuming from us and feeding our large corporation? So from there is when they truly start reflecting on what is it that the people want. And that's when they start adapting. And when people show them, we want transparency, we want sustainability, we want you to do things differently, at some point it adds enough pressure for them to really consider it and eventually make change. So I truly think we can all just make our individual actions and impact through voting with our dollars.
Great. Okay, so we're going to take a couple audience questions. One attendee asks about a food question for Greg, which is that organic food now seems to be shrink wrapped in plastic in the major grocery stores. Which is worse, eating non-organic to avoid the plastic or choosing the organic produce wrapped in plastic?
Oh, wow. So I think that's a similar question to the sort of hypothetical question I put out there about whether you should buy the locally grown produce or the organic produce from thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
There are lots of these trade-offs. I'm not going to go into my own personal views on organics because that will get me in trouble with the USDA and the National Organic Program. Um, I think that one of the importance, especially with food, I think it's really important to think very much about why you're making the choices that you're making. There are a lot of people who choose organics because of personal purity, and while I believe in that to a certain extent because health is very important to me, I also I don't want people to choose organic purely because of their own personal purity and their own personal health. I think that um, for me, the desire to go into organic and sustainable agriculture has as much to do with what's good for our planet and what's good for the soil as it does for just me as an individual. Um, if I was going to make a choice between, say, a plastic box of salad greens from a big box store that's labeled organic and a loose leaf head of lettuce in a produce section that isn't wrapped in anything, I would choose the latter.
Great, thank you. We have another question that was submitted ahead of time by Karen, and she asks, what are some easy and inexpensive changes that one can make on a fixed income? Do any of you have a thought on that?
I was
Maria?
thinking, Maria,
Julie?
you would with your store? No, I was just thinking of Maria. I mean, already I've noted down, I've been in this for so long and just being reminded of some of the, the micro shifts that can be made that I feel like, Maria, you've really brought to light so, so nicely around thinking about refills. I mean, and taking advantage of our municipal, our municipalities offer composting and recycling and smaller waste bins, and I think that's been interesting. But Maria, what do you think?
So I started my zero waste journey when I was in college. So I have not a lot of flexible money to still practice sustainability, but I really would save up just to buy the certain things that I wanted to buy. And some of the things, actually ended up saving me money. So like little things like a reusable water bottle. Whenever I was thirsty, I would be like, oh, I really want to buy some water. There's no water around me. And so then I just got a free water bottle as merchandise because we all know at conferences and events, they give out a bunch of merchandise like t-shirts and pens and reusable water bottles. So I had my little collection, and from there I saved money on buying water bottles. And of course that leads to sustainable change, but as a college student, that helped me save money. In other instances, I would bring my reusable bag everywhere. And nowadays, they add the 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents for any time that you use a bag at stores, at grocery stores. So naturally, having my own reusable bag, I always avoided those little fees. And then also just like using all my things up, like all my products, and not consuming as much and things that I didn't really need. And especially when I had things at home that I haven't even tried, haven't even opened, from samples of events that I would attend, I would honestly not use them and then buy things. So once I stopped doing that and I would just use what I had at home up until the point where it ended, then I would save money that way. In other ways is also by buying in bulk. When you buy in bulk, it's usually higher up front, but you're buying at a larger amount. So then you're saving money on the commute and you're not having to buy it as often, and you're getting it at a bulk price. So those are all the, like, a few examples of ways that I would save money and be sustainable.
Wonderful.
That's
Okay,
great.
I'm gonna see if there's, oh, but Julie, did you want to add?
I was just going to say, that was a great answer, Maria. And you know what I've done over the years working with folks is when people ask the same question you've been asking, Aaron, about what the individual role is, it's really pausing and just like thinking about these choices we make on a daily basis, which we've talked through. You know, food consumption, you know, electricity, transportation. You can kind of go through all of your daily actions that have actually carbon implications. And rather than think you can cover all of that, I think it's interesting, you know, from fixed income to in general, to really take a good look at how you are managing all those pieces, you know, from taking your lunch to bringing your lunch, or from buying your lunch to bringing your lunch, you know, to everything Maria said. I think you start to realize these behaviors and these habits we've created that need shifting. So I hope that's been inspired today. I know I've been inspired by Greg and Maria to reevaluate some of those things myself in just today's call. So thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to take one more question and then I'm going to hand it back to Mass Challenge, because I just saw this question from John, an attendee, who asks about greenwashing. Are there bad actors who advertise their products as healthy and organic, but are actually not, which may confuse the customer? What can we do about it? So I would be interested to hear about, you know, some thoughts on greenwashing.
Yeah. So there are a lot of companies that are using greenwashing as a way to sell their products. And the way that I think about it is they are greenwashing because the green movement is growing, in the sense that people are looking to look into what is in their products, who's making it, where's it manufactured, is it harmful for your body? And when people are asking these questions, it puts pressures on these companies to align with the values that people are looking for and make sure that they are getting their products assumed, consumed, and bought. So that is when they will change over to things like, oh, we're organic or dye-free. For example, Tide has always been the dark blue color for laundry, right? But now they have the clear color because at some point they realized that there were enough consumers who were getting rashes from the harsh coloring and chemicals that they have in their dyes. So now they have a sensitive skin one that is dye-free and unscented. And honestly, they didn't start that way because they didn't really prioritize those values up until the point where people were complaining about their rashes or trying other laundry brands that are their competitors. So they're trying to stop losing those customers. So they do those things because of us, and again, through our voting dollars. And yes, that can be confusing for the consumer, because then they're like, oh, Tide now has like a more natural one. Like, great, I'm all set. But really, it would be so much better if you were to support a smaller business that started with those values and that will keep those values, you know, and that will continue to promise to have healthy products. And the ways that people can educate themselves is through being mindful as to what brands you're supporting, who you're shopping from on shelves, whether it comes to food or products. And then also, if you really want to take the time, you can also look into the companies. There are so many apps nowadays that are telling you, like, look, be aware of these specific ingredients because of the health issues that they can be linked to. So if you just take the 2 seconds to turn the bottle around, usually the front is how the company is marketing it, and the back is where the actual quality of the product is being shown. So if you just turn the bottles around or look at what's in the ingredients, then you'll see, oh, this is ingredient that they say is really bad for my age, for my gender, like I should probably just not stay away from this. And then again, you're not funding that company. And the goal is that at some point they will take that out and try to make products that are healthier for us and sustainable, because I feel like those two markets really align really well.
Wonderful. Yeah, it really indicates the power of sustainable choices and sustainable living. So I want to thank all of you for your expertise and for joining us today. It was a really engaging and insightful conversation, and I'm going to turn it back to Mass Challenge to close the event.
Well, thank you, Erin, and thanks to the panelists here. I was taking notes actively as everyone was speaking, and Proud New England are here. I was checking a number of those boxes personally. Drive in EV, have solar at home, we compost at home. We're starting a little garden for our own produce. Farm share or CSA. One thing that I didn't hear much about was actually rewilding. My wife is listening to this recently, but essentially, rewilding with native plants, and less grass, less water, and a more sustainable yard, if you will. So wanted to raise that for the crowd, and certainly, I think that as many of us likely have looking for the free and clear packaging or the that sort of marketing message. So it's really validating to hear a number of the boxes checked, but also some new tips and tricks that I appreciate from the group here. So I'll just briefly say, thank you again to Boston Globe for organizing this event and for collaborating with Mass Challenge. If there are startups or corporates in the audience who are wondering how they can bring their ideas to market or source ideas from startups like we heard from today, happy to be the bridge. Reach out to us or to our friends at Boston Globe, and we hope to help you in your sustainability journey, if you will. And with that, I'll say thanks and nudge you to join another Mass Challenge posted conversation tomorrow morning, if possible. So thank you again for joining, and here's to a more sustainable future. Thanks, everybody.